Hello, everyone. Oh, that was overblown, I think. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me, see me, and I'm not too noisy. Or loud,
Same
rather.
here.
Yeah, and same for Dan. So let us know in the chat if our audio balance is off or fine. This stream is going to be janky as hell because the service we were using it's no longer available to us. So we are flying blind right now. We're using OBS and we're sort of half using Teams to do it, but it's not great. So I'm going to have to figure out a more permanent solution for next week. But for now, this is going to have to do. Hopefully, as long as you can hear us and see us and we sound okay, that's all that matters. But yeah, all right, give me a sec to pull up my notes for this. I've just closed the YouTube link again. All right. Okay. Do my mic test. Testing 1 2 3.
Testing
Testing
1 2
1 2
3. Testing 1 2
3.
3 for me too.
All right, I think I'm good to go when you're. No one in the chat's complaining about the audio, so.
Okay. I am now recording.
I'm now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central podcast, episode 382 for October 16th, 2025. Hey everyone, Jan Rubino here, joined with Zac Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central podcast this week. Well, we hope you like Copilot, or at least you're interested in Copilot, because a lot of Copilot news just dropped today. Some big news for Windows 11, so we'll go through all those major features and tell you what's new, what's cool, what we think about it. Of course, Windows 10 end of life also happened on Tuesday, so we'll kind of cover that news. And then finally, the Xbox Ally is now out, and all the reviews dropped yesterday. We'll go through some of the reviews and do a roundup of them and just talk about the device in general, what people are kind of saying about it. But it should be kind of interesting, plus anything else that may happen as the podcast goes on. Zac, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
I'm not too bad. I'm quite interested in all this Windows news that was dropped this week. It is very interesting. I'm curious on your thoughts. How are you?
Not too bad. Definitely a long week. Looking forward to a break. But yeah, overall pretty good week we had. So yeah, I guess let's just jump into it. We can go right into the big Copilot news. So Microsoft actually teased this earlier this week by what did they drop? Was it a little video or an image or something like that?
They dropped a few tweets sort of suggesting that they were about to introduce a new feature that would require you or allow you to use your fingers less when using a computer, which was an interesting way to sort of begin teasing this announcement.
Right. Yeah, and it wasn't Windows 12 as some people I think were hoping for. I think we're still a ways from that, as we probably should be. This AI stuff I think is moving too fast right now to uh, completely launch a new operating system around it. But so what did happen? So this morning, 9 a.m., the news dropped, and what came of it?
Yeah, so this announcement was actually a number of kind of smaller announcements to make up one big sort of Copilot push on Windows 11. So we've known for a while now that Microsoft has been working on features like Copilot Vision, which allows Copilot to see your screen and you can talk with it while you're browsing the web or working in an app. Features like Copilot Actions, which allowed Copilot to go out and do things for you on the web. And other minor Copilot related stuff here and there that have sort of been sprinkled out throughout the year was sort of re-announced this week as a big sort of push forward for Windows as an agentic operating system. And there is some new stuff in here that sort of enhances that and highlights agentic experiences more so than what we were seeing previously. So we'll start with Hey Copilot, which is the new wake word that is coming to Windows 11 that will allow you to, at any point in the system, no matter where you are, just shout Hey Copilot and start talking with Microsoft Assistant about what's on your screen. And Microsoft is sort of beginning this big marketing push around Windows 11 as the computer you can talk to. Microsoft is convinced that people want to talk to their computers. They already are talking to their computers, not directly to their computers, but when they're in Teams meetings or using, some sort of video calling service, they're already talking to their computers, just to a human on the other end.
That is true,
Yeah,
actually.
and
And
as
I never really kind of thought about it that way, but it's actually an interesting point.
Yeah, and so Microsoft is sort of taking that a step further and go, why does a human have to be at the other end? Why can't you just talk to Copilot instead and talk to them about anything? It doesn't have to be work related. It can be for creative purposes. It can be because you're just interested in learning more about whatever it is you're on screen, or it can just be as a back and forth if you just want somebody by your side, or something in this case in regards to AI, something by your side to sort of chat with you about the stuff you're seeing on your screen. And so at any point in the system now, you'll be able to, or soon, I guess, you'll be able to just say, hey, Copilot, what are your thoughts on this? Or hey, Copilot, how do I edit the background of this image in this app I'm using? It can be used as a tool for just communication. It can be used as a tool to help you. It can teach you how to do things as you're sort of working your way through an app. So if you don't know how to use Premiere Pro, for example, or if you don't know how to use a certain function in Photoshop or DaVinci Resolve or any app of, Word, anything, you can say, hey, Copilot, how do I format this text so it looks like XYZ? And Copilot can look at your screen and go, hey, so if you click up here and go there, then that's how you can enable that thing that you just asked me to figure out. And so obviously this sorry, go on, Dan.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt for a second. It's kind of funny and talk about that as the news came out. My friend and PR relay person at Microsoft actually gave me an example about that today. Donnie was tweeted me and he said that he had a fun scenario today about talking to the PC. He says, I could not for the life of me figure out how to change an image, do something specific in PowerPoint. And listen, I'm pretty old myself here. Like using PowerPoint, yeah, I'm not familiar with it myself. And we work with Google, which makes it even harder because I don't know how to do a lot of stuff in Sheets either. But anyways, he goes on. He says he used Vision to show Copilot my screen, explain my problem, and it guided me through it flawlessly. So I think that's actually a really good example of like how real world is can actually help you solve those occasional weird problems. Now, this won't be something you use every 5 minutes, of course. And I think people who don't use it or have never tried it are going to be very dismissive and cynical about it. But once you try it and use it for something, you might be like, oh, there's actually something here. This is actually kind of interesting. But anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so that's one of the sort of big sort of features they're pushing forward here for Windows 11. And they're sort of calling this their attempt at making every Windows 11 PC an AI PC. There's always listening. There's always this ambiently available assistant that you can just get to at any point in the system just by shouting its name and then asking whatever it is you want to ask. And then around that, they're sort of doing more to make Copilot more accessible in Windows as well. So in addition to the new wake word, and you can also say goodbye to it when you're done and it will stop listening. They're also adding Copilot to the taskbar. And so this is new in the sense that, that search box that's sort of been on the Windows 11 taskbar since Windows 11 came out, they're sort of updating it so that instead of it being a button that goes into Windows search, it's going to open Copilot instead. And from the search box, you can begin chatting with Copilot. You can use it for search like you've always been able to do as well. So if you want to find an Apple file, you can still do that. And it works as you would expect, just with a newer interface that's housed in Copilot. But you can also start chatting with it from that taskbar search box as well. So if you wanted to begin a conversation with Copilot, you no longer have to go into the Copilot app, or in this case, shout, hey, Copilot. You can just start using it straight from the taskbar. And this will also give you quick access to things like Copilot Vision as well. And so instead of having to open Copilot and then clicking on the Vision icon, you can just click on it straight from the search box on the taskbar and instantly get access to the Copilot Vision feature, which allows the assistant to see what's on your screen. And this is clearly for people who aren't comfortable with talking to their computer. I think Microsoft knows that there will be a lot of pushback from people who don't really want to interact with their PCs using their voice. And so this is for those people. You'll still be able to do all of the same stuff, but straight through the taskbar search box instead. This will be opt-in, and so it isn't outright replacing the Windows search pane yet. So if you still want to sort of use that old school current interface, you can do that. But for everybody else who does want the sort of AI-assisted search box to be present on the taskbar, that will be coming soon as well. Microsoft says that they want to make the taskbar a dynamic hub that helps you accomplish more with less effort, transforming everyday interactions into moments of productivity and delight. So that's probably the biggest sort of user experience change, I guess, that's coming to Windows 11 as part of this announcement today, the fact that the search box is becoming a Copilot chat box. I'm curious, Dan, do you think this will encourage people to use Copilot more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously the point, and, full bias here, as I've talked about in this podcast before, I'm a fan of Copilot. I use it a lot for I use it for my job. I do use it in my personal life a lot as well. So I really enjoy it. So adding the into the search bar, which I don't use actually for search, to me is a little bit better. Uh, I actually just leave usually Copilot open all the time. Now the voice stuff, you made the good point earlier about how we're already talking to our computers. In fact, you and I are both doing it right now. So that's kind of halfway there. Just now, instead of a person on the other end, you would be talking to AI. But then, as I threw out on Twitter this morning about this, that I think people often fall into the trap of like, this is what I would use, and that's all that matters, right? The rest of the world be damned. They should all follow the same patterns as myself. Um, Yet there's a very big generational difference in how people adopt and use technology that I think people are often dismissive of or just completely forget. So you can find these stories online. They're always kind of fun. Some of them I think are overblown and stuff like that, about like how there's a whole generation now that doesn't know how to use the old dial phones, right? The ones I grew up with. Like they look at it, this was actually in a horror movie that was out recently. It was really funny. The girl went to his old house and there's a dialing phone. She's like, how do you use this thing? They also don't know often how to tell time using a traditional clock. And then, of course, you and I grew up with smartphones, which were originally just cell phones that turned into smartphones. And the original point of these devices, as I like to remind people, was you called people all the time on them. That was the point of it. And there were articles written and complaints about how people were talking on their phones all the time in public and how annoying it was. They created special train cars on Amtrak where you couldn't talk. And now that's turned into the fact that we have smartphones. No one almost talks on them as much anymore. They're mostly used for text and everything. And then you have literally a generation raised on iPads and touchscreens, right? And this isn't, I'm not necessarily saying this is a good thing, but the fact is a lot of parents are just like, here's an iPad, now shut up so I can do my own things. And so you have a bunch of, you know, kids growing up who just only know iPads and touchscreens, which is why Apple is even kind of trying to merge their MacBook into an iPad. At least that's supposedly the game plan. Even Google's is doing this, right? They're merging Android into their Chrome OS to make it more familiar with people, because there's a generation growing up that is very different from you and I, who have a very different experience from technology. And just because you and I don't talk to a computer or find it a little bit strange, doesn't mean a younger generation can't grow up in that environment and find it just totally normal. And I think that's an important distinction. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed slam dunk, but it's something I think that people should at least kind of consider as a possibility here, because generations adopt around technology very, very differently. So I think that's an important thing here.
I think you're totally right. I think this really is for the next generation of people who are going to grow up using these devices. I guess the question comes up, like, what do devices look like in the future? Are they going to look like PCs like they do today? Are they going to be more like wearables or pendants or whatever they may be? That's sort of an unknown at this point. But at least for now, in the current form factors we have, I think this very much will benefit the next generation more than people who are already familiar with using Windows. Because there's still people who prefer the command line over a graphical user interface from the 80s and 90s, and they're never going to give that up. But I think as generations come forward and they grow up, they adapt to these sort of newer ways of computing. And so while all of us listening to this podcast are very familiar, or most of us are very familiar with the sort of graphical user interface using a keyboard and mouse, in 20, 30 years time, when all the babies are grown up, that are babies now have grown up and become adults, they might find the idea of using a computer with a keyboard and mouse archaic, which
Right.
is insane. But I
mean, even forgetting the change in technology and the modality, even when things are technically the same, people have a tough time shifting. We talked about this all the time with Edge, the challenges there. I could go on and on about how I think Edge is a better browser option for a lot of people, but they won't switch because they know their current browser and they just know how it works and they know where everything is, and that's it. Same with operating systems. There's this weird like meta argument that people make that like people walk into Best Buy and are comparing Macs and Windows laptops, and then they're just choosing one based on which one's better. And it's like that's rarely the case. If you use Mac OS, you're very, very likely to go back and buy a new MacBook. And if you use Windows, you're very, very likely to go back to using Windows. The only thing that changes that is usually if your job changes or you have different requirements suddenly. But even when, for all intents and purposes, OS 10 and Windows 11 are exactly the same. They really are, right? I mean, fundamentally, they're just operating systems that run apps with keyboards and mice. But even there, people don't like change.
Yeah.
So there are these, it all comes down to just what you know and what you've experienced, right? Like you and I might be like, Mac OS might actually be better for you and I. But because we grew up running Windows, there's no way we're going to switch, right? But that's not a logical argument against it.
Yeah, definitely. So this the Windows search thing, as I just mentioned a minute ago, that for those who are because I know there's already people who are concerned about Microsoft touching this interface and changing up how search works. Microsoft does say this new experience will leverage the existing Windows APIs that Windows Search already uses to return your apps, files, and settings. And this new experience does not grant Copilot access to the content you look for. So it's literally just essentially they're picking up all of the tech that makes Windows Search work today and shoving it into a Copilot interface that can dynamically switch between doing a local search and doing a Copilot chat. And so for those who are worried about the quality of search results or giving Microsoft or Copilot access to your search data, that is apparently not a thing with this change. And again, it is opt-in, so you won't have to sort of use this. If you want to have the traditional search pane, you can have that, but this is the new thing they announced. Now, moving on to
I just want to address some comments. Someone's saying that they find the name Copilot very non-personalized. Anthropic does a better job. And they say, in fact, Cortana sounds more human than Copilot. That is true, but let me recap the history and tell you why I don't think it's going to be an issue for very long. When they first came out with Copilot, back before it was even called Copilot, it was called Bing Chat. I was privy to talking to the engineers behind it, and they were telling me how their biggest discussion was how personal should they make AI for the user. They erred on the side of not making it personal because they didn't want people to form relationships with it, which is a thing, right? If you go online, there's just an article written every day about this phenomena that's kind of happening. But what's going to happen is over time, that's been shifting away. So if you already use Copilot Pro, you already get access to one of their labs features, which is their kind of animated icon that you have. It's an avatar. It gives it a face, basically. And we know that they're going to allow you to customize that in the future. I think eventually they'll start with pre-made avatars just to get it out to ship it. So you can just pick from like a video game character or something. But eventually you'll probably use AI itself to design itself. You'll tell Copilot, make this, and then that will be the representation. I've told them that they should allow people to upload photos to create images. So that's one thing. I think also they're going to allow you to change the name from Copilot to whatever you want to make it. So these are solvable problems, but they did them for sort of, I think, good reasons. But this stuff is changing very quickly. But that is definitely one way they're going to make this more personal, because the new CEO of AI at Microsoft has a very different vision of AI than when they first came out with Bing Chat. He does believe in this more personalized experience, and that's what they're changing it to. But it's going to take a little bit of time there.
Yeah, I do agree. So moving on to the sort of, I guess, the big sort of announcement that was made this week, and this announcement really does sort of lay the foundations for the future of Windows as an agentic operating system. This is the interesting stuff here, the more interesting stuff, and this is a feature called Copilot Actions. Now, Microsoft did announce Copilot Actions early this year, but it was only for the web, so it was only basically built into Edge, and it allowed Copilot to go out and sort of complete tasks on your behalf. So if you wanted Copilot to book you, I don't know, a hotel or try to find you a flight, it could go out and do that on your behalf by asking for it within the browser. But that was limited to the browser. It couldn't do that system-wide. That's what this today's announcement is. Copilot Actions for Windows, which allows Copilot, the app, to sort of take a task that you've given it and complete it on your behalf. It allows Copilot to control and interact with the apps and files on your system. And this really is the sort of the first steps towards a truly agentic OS. So how this feature works is, at least when it begins rolling out, whenever it does, these are all to be announced in regards to availability. You'll be able to go into Copilot and you'll be able to ask Copilot to complete you a task, and you'll be able to give it files, or if it's just related to sort of interacting with an app, it will just go ahead and do it straight away. But you say, hey Copilot, I need you to sort of adjust the orientation and crop these images to 16:9. You can give Copilot all the files, and it will go cool, and it will create. I don't know if it creates, or maybe it's already got the user account, but it will create a user account on Windows specifically for the agent, which then gives it its own desktop interface environment. Where it can go off and complete those tasks without interrupting your workflow. So you can give Copilot this task, you can minimize the window and go about your day. So if you were writing an email or creating a video or whatever it is you're doing on Windows, you can give Copilot task, minimize that window, and go about and do whatever it is you were currently doing while Copilot works.
How funny it would be you switch back to the desktop and you just see a game of solitaire open.
Yeah, procrastinating Copilot. That's really funny. So yeah, you can do that, minimize, go and do whatever it is you're doing, and then you can check on Copilot later and see if it did the task that you asked it to do. Or you can watch Copilot do the task via like a little preview window that appears in the Copilot app of the Copilot's desktop where they're working on the stuff. And you'll get a chat box along the right side, which gives you all the steps it's currently walking through. And it will even prompt you if, say, an unexpected pop-up appears, or if it's trying to access what it deems to be personal information. It will say, hey, user, do you want me to continue? Which one should I click? One of the examples Microsoft gave me was, if you've asked it to edit a bunch of photos, but you recently installed a different app that can handle photos. And so when that happens, Windows will prompt you to choose an app. Like you say, which app would you like me to open this with? If Copilot wasn't expecting that, it will ping you and say, hey, Windows is asking which app I should use. Which one do you want me to use? And so then you can go in and sort of tell it what to do from there, and then it will sort of jump back on track and keep working automatically. You can at any moment take control. So if Copilot starts doing something wrong, or if you decide that you no longer need Copilot to complete this task, you can press take control, and that will bring whatever Copilot was doing into your desktop interface, where you can sort of cancel it or continue working on it as the human you are. And so this is really, really interesting. This is the sort of stuff I think I've teased on the podcast before as what Microsoft was working on over a year ago at this point. This idea that Copilot would be able to reach in and interact with the system on your behalf. And this paired with Hey Copilot, this sort of hands-free experience, really does begin to paint the picture of what an agentic operating system can be like. Right now, I'd argue it's quite clunky in the sense that you have to go into this mode specifically. There's no, I don't believe, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't believe you can just say, hey Copilot, can you crop all these images for me? I think you have to give Copilot the files manually and stuff for it to be able to do that still. But we're not far away from it being a much more seamless experience where you can just shout, hey Copilot, ask it to do something, and literally never touch the computer and watch that task become completed right in front of you. But yeah, this really is the backbone, the foundations of Windows becoming an agentic AI operating system. Now, Dan, I am curious to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think this is something people are going to find useful? Do you think people are going to find it creepy or scary? And also, this works without an NPU. This is all cloud powered. So everything Copilot will do on your system is powered by the cloud. It has to send data to Microsoft for Microsoft to be able to process the query and send it back. Are people going to be concerned for their privacy here?
Well, I think that's true with the query part, but I wonder, obviously, if it's like you're batch editing a bunch of photos, I don't think it's going to send all your photos to Microsoft, right?
Well, it would have to analyze the photos using Copilot Vision, which is cloud-based. So it would have to see I believe that's how that works. It would have to see what the image is.
Yeah, so I had this discussion with someone on Twitter this morning too, which is this privacy issue, right? And you and I have talked about this endlessly here, where privacy doesn't matter. And I don't say that like dismissively of people who think it does matter, because there is definitely a vocal group of consumers where this stuff does matter. They fight for it. They bring attention to it. It's very important to them. And I'm not dismissing their points at all. I'm just saying the broader population has proven through its actions in the market that it really doesn't kind of care about this stuff. Even Apple has slowly moved away from this kind of model. They still try and bring it up every once in a while, but like, has Apple's privacy stuff made a dent really in Android use? Like, Android users don't care, and Google is pretty lax. I don't say lax, but you know, they collect a lot of data, right? And they have a lot of services. Meta, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, same thing, right? Uh, so I think it is a valid concern. We should raise questions. We should definitely be interested in it. When you and I were in a briefing, one of the first things I brought up was about security and how everything works. So they're definitely trying to be ahead of this. But I don't I think this is just going to be the way it is, right? I've said before that in order for AI to actually be really useful, because that's what everyone's asking for. It's like, oh, it's great, it's a chatbot, but when's it actually going to be able to do something? What's the killer app? Well, in order for it to be the killer app, you're going to have to do this kind of stuff to it. And that's what's going to kind of really make the difference. And some people are going to be like, nope, I opt out. And that's fine. Just like people who don't like the telemetry in Windows, so they go to Linux. It's like, okay, fine. That's why we have options in the market. I will say, though, the problem and the risk you have in doing that is you're going to become a dinosaur because corporations care about productivity. And AI is going to give a big boost to companies for productivity and even individuals. Forget the corporation. For people who are just creators themselves, maybe they're their own business, they're going to be able to be way more productive and get much more done with this kind of technology in the coming years. And for the people who shun it, might as well be on a typewriter. They're going to miss out on this. They're going to be slower to market. They're not going to have as much stuff polished. Um, it's just the way it is. And so I'm just going to tell people, you kind of risk falling behind because whether you like it or not, and listen, there's a lot to not like and there's a lot to be concerned with, but this is happening. And when people say, oh, we don't want Microsoft to do this, we don't want Windows to be like this, I'm like, well, first of all, some people do actually want this. I do personally. But the other thing is if they don't do it, just like I was saying, the individual will fall behind and become a dinosaur. Microsoft will fall behind and become the dinosaur because Apple's going to do this. Google's going to do this. You're going to see everyone else do this, regardless of what Microsoft thinks. Say they're just adamantly against it. And then Windows is just going to come off as being stale because everybody else will have an AI operating system. And Microsoft will be like, no, we don't believe in that. We believe in user privacy. And then it's like, all right, cool. Watch your market share fall because that's exactly what's going to happen. There is not enough people out there who are against AI, who are against or have the privacy concerns that will make a difference in this market. And that's just the way it is. For better or worse,
Yeah.
we're going to go down that route.
See, I do wonder if the question then becomes, or the conversation then becomes, do people want? Because you're right, Google and Apple will do this. OpenAI is going to do this with whatever it is.
And China is definitely going to do this.
Everyone is going to do this. Does Microsoft have a stake in this market, or is because Microsoft is so anti-consumer, are people going to ignore it all over time? Because even though Microsoft is technically first right now to do this on an operating system platform at this level, will people just sort of dismiss it and go, yeah, I'll wait for Google to do it. I'll wait for Apple to do it. I'm not going to invest in this because I'm not interested in Windows. Is that? I think that's
the consumer market is always going to be a challenge here by default but consumers may not always be creating on their laptops but I will say younger generations, that is kind of what they do. They're always doing graphics. They're always doing their own music. They're doing their own videos, especially, right? I've said it before, you and I would do way more video if we had AI. We could just shoot video, give it to it and be like, do a cut of this. Like once AI starts doing that, guess what, people, for better or worse, you'll see more videos from Zac and I. But that's going to open a door for us, right? Because right now, we're not doing enough video that you and I would like to be doing for the site. But once AI is able to just do a video for us, now we can do that. So, there is that element. But the other thing, of course, is that Microsoft has the enterprise market. We know about 50% of PCs sold are enterprise. And they've been making a lot of headway with Copilot and Enterprise because this is, where people go, especially our audience, like, oh, but what's the advantage of Copilot? Well, for Microsoft, the advantage is that it's in all their Office apps, it's in Outlook, it's in Edge, it's in Windows, it's in Azure, it's in GitHub, it's in all these services, it's on your phone, right? And that reach is something that other companies can't do. So you may really like Anthropic, but Anthropic will never do what Copilot's going to do on Windows, right?
Right.
And that's going to matter for companies. Uh, because companies, or even in Microsoft Teams with Copilot, right? The ability to summarize meetings and then send it off to Word and access the Active Directory, like that is stuff that Anthropic, OpenAI, Google will never have access to, but that Microsoft will. So that's going to cause a lot of momentum in that market. The consumer one, I think, definitely will take a little bit longer. But again, I think you're looking at generational differences. If they can get younger people back onto Windows PCs, they may start using that stuff more often, become more comfortable with it.
Yeah, because I guess I'm looking too far into the future where eventually these experiences, not just what Microsoft's doing, but when all these other tech companies eventually do this agentic AI experience, it's going to become ubiquitous in the sense that the assistant is aware of everything you do on your computer. Right now, with this Copilot stuff that they've just announced, that isn't really the case. Copilot still only sees what you allow it to see. Recall is kind of there waiting in the sidelines. That is already a thing that is capturing everything you do, and it's logging it and making it easily searchable using natural language. But that is not hooked up to Copilot at all. There's no agentic capability there. It's quite literally just a clever search box, which allows you to go back and view snapshots and some clever magic there, which allows you to jump back into some projects if it supports that workflow. But there isn't a huge sort of jump from going from that to Copilot announces integration with Recall, so now it can refer back to all of your snapshots whenever you want it to. So you no longer have to have Copilot Vision always running, or you don't have to enter into Copilot Vision specifically so Copilot can see what you're working on. Copilot already knows because it's able to access Windows Recall data. Now I know this sounds horrendous from a privacy perspective, but I can't see it not happening. That is a very powerful resource for Copilot to be able to access if you give it access. And that would turn Copilot into a much more useful agentic assistant for you. But then that's when things get really annoying because since Windows isn't on phones, I can't take Windows with me. And so I can't, while Copilot will be able to, I have the Copilot app on my phone, especially on iPhone, this will be a bigger problem than Android. I'm pretty sure maybe Android can do this, but on iPhone at least, Copilot won't be able to have that same level of access to the things I do on my phone. So it won't know that I've been in the Mail app on my phone or Twitter or whatever it might be, and I won't be able to go, "Hey, Copilot."
I will say this though. What about the ability Yuri mentioned about it running on its own separate desktop? Well, why not a virtual desktop in the cloud? And where it has information, and it could literally just be like a secretary for you where you ask it, it goes onto that desktop and just pulls out your information and stuff that it needs, sends it to the Copilot app itself because that's what you requested.
Yeah, I guess that's one way around it, but then it still wouldn't capture the activities I do on my phone. Like if I was in an app on my phone, it wouldn't know on the because I'm pretty sure Android you can do this, and an app can take screenshots and identify things. I don't think Apple will let apps do that. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. I'd be very surprised if Apple allows something like that, like Recall for iOS. Whereas Recall for Android could be a thing. Like I don't see why, because that platform's open enough. I think you can get away with it. So yeah, this is one of those.
Although, going down the road, looking really far down, people have articulated the idea that we won't have apps on phones, or rather, they're going to become less important as these AIs have agents. The AI creates an agent. There's also no reason why, and there's also been talk about this, that Gemini can't talk to Copilot, right?
Right,
yeah. There's been talk of coming up with this because everybody has this problem. Like, Grok. So it's on X, it has an app on your phone, and it's in Tesla cars.
Nice.
Yeah. But it's not going to be on your PC. It has severe limits, right? It's not going to be into your Office documents, right? And Siri has this issue too. Of course, they all have limitations. I mentioned Anthropic. They're all, exactly. They're all very isolated. So it's like they all, so I think eventually they're going to come up with a protocol, just like all the other protocols on the internet, where agents can talk to each other. You log in, and it can then fetch that information for you, because that's really going to be the only true way all this kind of works. Because otherwise, every company would have to build out its own entire ecosystem, which is just not going to happen.
Well, sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, you can respond. I was going to bring up something else.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say yeah, but I think that's the problem, right? It's going to come down to ecosystem, an ecosystem lock-in. I think Apple will have this now because Apple
They're
does
going to
everything.
try.
They're going to try, of
Yeah.
course, yeah. Of course, they don't
Yeah.
have the background in AI to actually deliver a strong product, at least not yet. Gemini, Google does, but they don't have PCs really. They have Chrome OS, but it's not really made a dent in the market. Maybe with the Android laptops that are on the way, that could change things, especially in the low end. I think Windows PCs in the low end are in trouble if Android comes along and is able to actually be good there. But yeah, Microsoft obviously only has the PC side, and so at least as things currently stand, the end user is going to have to choose which assistant they want to invest in the most,
Right.
and it's going to become in the future it's going to become one of these things where you have a bunch of different AI assistants and they all get jealous of each other because you didn't tell me that. Why did you tell Copilot that? You didn't tell me that.
So another push I've seen, and it makes sense too, is data portability, which is the idea that all the stuff the AI has on you, all the dirt, can be downloaded and then
Uploaded to
imported, uploaded to a new one, right? Basically a brain transplant almost, right? So like this stuff is also being discussed, and again, I think is probably one of the only ways all of this succeeds. And that's where, again, the push against AI, stupid. The idea of like trying to limit with the privacy and stuff like that, like, yeah, we should have privacy, but I think what people should be attacking is this stuff. Like there should be open protocols, there should be data transfers, there should be those kind of things, because you need to accept this stuff is going to happen. I just want to address someone in comments asked about Xbox, if we're going to have Copilot for that. So actually, yeah, there is. It's in labs right now, and Microsoft demonstrated it on the new Ally handheld. But there's a Copilot. So the new Copilot Ally X has Copilot built into it too. When you hold down the key and it brings up Copilot, and might be wondering like, why would I do that? Because it uses the same technology of Copilot Vision. So you can be playing your game and stuck somewhere, and you bring up Copilot Vision, and it'll see your screen, and then you can ask it a specific question. How do I beat this enemy? Where do I find the key? Where do I do this? And it's going to search the internet for you, come back and give you the answer. And this is already available. And NVIDIA has already done this too. So this is the future of gaming and AI. That's not even touching the whole using AI to generate worlds and NPCs and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to be an assistant. And again, that's a crazy thing because I play games. I get stuck. I put it down. I go to YouTube. I have to look up the walkthrough, fast forward, find the scene, watch it, memorize it, go back to my game, right? But now I'll be able to just hold down the button and have AI tell me. That's kind of a game changer for a lot of people who I would say are casual players. I understand if you're a hardcore player, you're cringing right now. That's fine. But that's how Copilot's going to come to Xbox, as well as I think probably also be built into the operating system in the sense that you can get very smart recommendations based on the games you played and have a lot more information to play with based on your habits. So anyway, sorry, Zach.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, it's literally called Gaming Copilot, and you can press a button on the hardware, and it will like basically invoke it and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. So the other Copilot thing they announced was Copilot connectors, and this is an interesting feature. This isn't as useful as I'd like it to be, but it's good. I guess this is sort of laying the foundation for a more sort of integrated experience. But Copilot connectors is a feature that allows you to link your things like OneDrive or Outlook or Google Mail or Google Calendar to Copilot. And so you'll be able to ask Copilot for specific things from your Google account or Microsoft account, like contact information or upcoming appointments. And so that sort of streamlines the whole process. You could be like, hey Copilot, what is my upcoming meeting on Wednesday? And if you've linked up to Gmail or Google Calendar, it will be able to pull that up for you and tell you that information straight through the Copilot interface, which is really, really nice. Annoyingly, it doesn't let you write emails or reply to emails. At least it doesn't say that you can do it in this blog post. So maybe that's a thing that's coming later. But in addition to the connector stuff, they also announced that Windows Copilot is now once again able to control Windows settings. This is something that Copilot, or technically Bing Chat, could do originally. Then it went away and now it's back. But they say they're finally adding an integration with Copilot Windows with Windows settings. Just ask Copilot a question about your Windows PC settings, which will provide a direct link to the relevant Windows settings. So if you want to, for example, make my cursor bigger or make my screen easier to read, you can punch that into Copilot, even say, hey, Copilot, use your voice, and Copilot will bring you to the necessary area where you can configure that setting in question. So that's all the big stuff from today's announcements. This is basically Microsoft's pitch for what they believe computing is going to be like going forward, without drastically changing things up in regard to UX. Obviously, this is very much all the tech, all the sort of skeleton of how this feature, that this experience is going to be. But they're yet to introduce a UI that is built around these experiences. This is all just coming to Windows 11. The Windows 11 interface we know and like, with the Copilot app sort of being the arms and legs and sort of handling most of the heavy lifting in regards to actions and Hey Copilot and whatnot. So you mentioned Windows 12 at the start of the show. Like, could this have been a Windows 12? I think yes, if they were ready to unveil a new UI, but I think Microsoft is being very cautious here.
Right. Yeah.
Because, they don't want to do too much at once. That's what Windows 8 was. The last time Microsoft tried to promote a new sort of input method for Windows, they did touch with Windows 8. And that was a big deal and nobody liked it, and because they went too far in one direction. I think what Microsoft has learned from that lesson is that we can introduce new ways of using Windows, but we have to do it on top of the experience people are familiar with to get them used to it. And then we can move forward with a more radical UI shift that better highlights this new input method that we're introducing. Because Windows doesn't have to look like it does once voice is a reliable primary input method. If I can just talk to my computers and get tasks done without ever having to touch my keyboard and mouse, I don't need a taskbar. I don't need all these app windows floating around. I just need a prompt box and I can get my tasks done that way. We're not there yet, and I think the reliability of this feature will sort of shape where Windows as an interface goes forward. I will say I got to finally try Copilot Vision today because they finally rolled it out to more markets. It's really slow. I'll be using Copilot Vision and I'll ask it a question and it'll think about it and go, yeah, you can click up here, and then it does work. Don't get me wrong, but it is not fluid. It's not. You can say, "Hey, Copilot." It takes a beat or two for the pop-up to appear and for it to actually start listening, and then you ask the question or whatever it is you're trying to do with Copilot. Then it has to process what you've just said, and then it generates a reply back and it talks out loud, and it does work. It's just kind of slow, and it's definitely one of those situations where I could do it faster if I just use my keyboard and mouse. That's big problem.
But solvable problem though, right? All this comes down to TOPS and hybrid computing as the phones become stronger with NPUs, same thing with the laptops. New Qualcomm chips have 80 TOPS, which someone mentions about that with LLMs being able to run on them, which is true. So, people ask right now, like, what can you do with 80 TOPS on a laptop? Well, probably not much, but that's the point. You put the hardware out there and you let developers then use that tool. So even Microsoft would be able to then offload some of their AI to your NPU, which they probably really want to do anyway, because you're using their processing power. And if you don't have to, and you can use your own local processing power, that's not only faster, it's more secure, but it's also more energy efficient. So, that is definitely one way where I think, this stuff is going to kind of improve.
Yeah.
I also say, have you tried it on the phone?
No, I've not. I've just tried it on Windows.
So Copilot Vision on the phone is really interesting. I've told you I've used it before, and they're doing it right now with the Pixel ads. The Pixel ads, all they're showing is someone holding their phone up with the camera on, and then asking the AI, what is this and how do I fix this and all that kind of stuff. That actually does work pretty well, both for Google and Copilot. But I think it's, if people have access to it, it's definitely you should try it. It's really kind of fun. And the speed thing, sure. The fluidity, sure. All that stuff's going to improve, though. Like, I think these are really easy, solvable problems that will change over the next 3, 6, 12 months.
Yeah. So we don't know when any of this is supposed to be coming. I think Hey Copilot is already rolling out, but the sort of experience where it automatically jumps you into Copilot Vision isn't yet rolling out, or if it is, it's rolling out very slowly. Microsoft says most of this is off by default, or it's rather opt-in, and I think they've learned their lesson from Recall. And so everything that we've talked about so far in the podcast is a feature that you have to go in and turn on yourself, especially the Copilot action stuff that requires you going into Windows settings and enabling an agentic sort of agent experiences, experimental agent experiences for that to even begin functioning. So none of this is automatic. So if you're somebody who is concerned about that, you don't have to worry. And also a lot of it is based on the Copilot app, which you can uninstall. So if you're somebody who is very uncomfortable with this, just right click, uninstall Copilot, and you won't have to worry about it. So that's a nice, benefit of it being app-based rather than system level. Although there is definitely hooks into the system for the agent stuff to work. Copilot as an app is very much the handler. It's the sort of where you go to get most of this started. And Hey Copilot and the stuff coming to the taskbar is just basically shortcuts into Copilot as an app versus baking this all into Windows at an OS system UI level. At least currently, like I said, with Windows 12 possibly on the horizon, that could change. But at least for now, it's very much handled by the Copilot app, which you can remove, which is nice. So yeah, we'll sort of keep up with this as it rolls out to the insider stuff over the next few months. I'm assuming this won't be generally available, most of this, until sometime in 2026. I'd be very surprised if it rolls out any sooner than that. But
yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the ability to uninstall Copilot is like kind of, I don't know, like if people don't like this stuff at all, then just right click and it's gone.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really see the problem here with that kind of stuff. Someone's asking also, do we think Windows 12 would have a requirement for like a 40 tops NPU? Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think they're waiting. I think they're going to wait till the market has enough laptops out there with NPUs where announcing a new operating system makes sense, right? So we're talking maybe a couple of years at least. And I think that's one reason, if you can get people off of Windows 10 right now, or in the next 6 months or next 12 months. Oh, sorry, phone's ringing there. If you can do that and get them to buy an AI PC today with 40 tops, then having that as a minimum requirement, or at least a requirement for a Windows 12 operating system, which I would believe would need an NPU to do this more hybrid stuff to make it actually a truly agentic OS. I think that would happen. So I think that's a good point. And it probably would be one change that, would probably slow down this transition to a Windows 12.
Yeah, this is why I think they kind of probably wouldn't, because one, the low end, it just wouldn't be compatible with the low end. Anything under $500, it just wouldn't, or $400 wouldn't be compatible with Windows 11. No,
Maybe.
12.
I mean, Qualcomm, you can buy a $500 Asus A14 with a 40 tops NPU.
Yeah, no, but you got to think of upgrade cycles aren't, whenever a new chip comes out, they're usually 5-10 years apart. And so, let's say businesses bought a bunch of low end devices 3 years ago when Windows 11 first came out. They upgrade their whole fleet with a bunch of low end crap that was compatible with Windows 11. Those laptops probably won't be updated again until 2032. It'll be a while.
But we just saw this, right? Microsoft literally did do hardware requirements from Windows 10 to Windows 11. You can make the exact same arguments for TPM 2.0.
Right, that's my argument for why they won't do it again, because they've only just done it. Like, Windows didn't up the system requirements really for over a decade. Like, from Windows 7, I wouldn't say, or maybe Windows Vista up to Windows 10, the system requirements didn't really change. The Windows 11 was the first time that jump ever took place, and unless it's just poor timing for Microsoft and the whole NPU thing just sort of came about a bit too late for that to be a requirement as well, I think it would be insane to do another system requirement bump that severe within the next half a decade. I hope
they do it.
Yeah.
And they should do it. Of course, we probably won't have much of an economy around in 5 years.
No, yeah. I think what they'll do is they'll do what they've done now with Copilot Plus PCs. There'll be a Windows 12 for everyone, which everyone who runs Windows 11 can upgrade to today. But if you want the agentic stuff, you need to have an NPU. I think that's what they'll. I think that there's no other way to do it. Otherwise, you cut off too many people. And Microsoft is already struggling to get people off of Windows 10. Like, we're about to talk about it now, but Windows 10 has finally reached end of life, and it still has 40% of the market. There's still over 500 million people running Windows 10 today. I don't foresee a Windows 12 coming along and once again bumping, because there's a whole year or 3 years of Windows 11 PCs that don't have an NPU that makes them Copilot Plus capable. And so the amount of people who could move off from Windows 11 to Windows 12 is negligible now, and even in 3 years time will probably still be negligible, because you got to remember, Intel still sort of back and forth on whether the whole NPU thing is necessary.
That's not quite true.
No, I know, but
the NPU is necessary. Their roadmap wasn't timed with this explosion for AI. So, because the new chip that was just announced, actually, we probably should have talked about that, but maybe next time. They just announced their next chips, which will be formally shown off at CES. Those have stronger NPUs, but they've also been in development for, I think, 5 or 6 years, so these chip designs go back a long time for them.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously the future of Windows is quite interesting, and I do believe a Windows 12 will happen, whether it's by name or something else is it remains to be seen. But I'd be very surprised if Windows 11 is it for the foreseeable. I especially with the possibilities when it comes to UI and how a computing desktop environment can be or look changing with agentic AI and generative AI. I think it would be surprising if Microsoft didn't do a Windows 12, frankly. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So let's move on to the last story for the podcast, and that's Windows 10's end of life. We knew it was coming. October 14 was the final day. And from there, nothing's really changed, which is kind of what we knew, right? We've seen this before, Windows 7 and Windows XP. The end of support date comes and goes, and a lot of people stick with the platform regardless, and nothing really changes right away. And that will remain the case for Windows 11 for probably a while, because as we just said, there's still 500 million plus people using Windows 10 on a variety of devices, ranging from 10 years old to 15 years old, or even older than that. And a lot of them, and most of them, I'd argue, are still perfectly capable machines that are good at their day-to-day task and are able to do what the people who are using them demand of them. And so with Windows 10 support coming to an end, there's a lot of people online sort of making a bigger deal out of this than there needs to be. There is the ESU program, which I think everybody who is using Windows 10 should absolutely have enrolled into by now. You still technically have a month, because on October 14, Microsoft did push out one final security update, which will cover you between now and when the next Patch Tuesday update is supposed to come out, which is November 11th, unless there's an emergency patch that is issued because of a vulnerability that's discovered between now and then, which seems unlikely. But yeah, within the next month, if you are using a Windows 10 PC, you should try and get your PC enrolled into the ESU program. It is free if you sign in with a Microsoft account, and if you're in the US or non-EEA markets, you have to sync with OneDrive. And if you're in the EEA, you don't have to do that, but you have to make sure you're signed in with a Microsoft account at least every 60 days. Or you can pay Microsoft money. I don't know why you would do that when it's free, but you can choose to pay Microsoft $30 or 1,000 Microsoft Reward points if you want to pay for the additional year of security updates. And that will cover you from now until October 2026. If you're an enterprise, you can actually have access to the ESU program for 3 years, and that will cover you up until 2028. But that's only for enterprise. If you're a consumer, if you're an individual, you don't get that access. All editions of Windows, as far as I'm aware, let me see if I can double check this. All editions of Windows except Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC 2021. Windows 10 IoT Enterprise LTSC 2021 are no longer supported. So Windows 10 version 15.07 all the way up to version 22H2 are no longer supported, and so they will not get any more security updates unless you enroll in the ESU program. The only additional Windows 10 that is still supported, as I mentioned, is Windows 10 Enterprise IoT LTSC 21H2. And the reason for that is this is the version of Windows Microsoft is hoping, ATMs and stuff are using, like point of service machines, that's what this version of Windows should be using. And so it makes sense that version is still supported. That version will still be supported for many, many years to come, until 2032, I believe. This isn't an additional Windows that you can just use. It isn't available to consumers. It's a commercial variant of Windows that you have to pay a lot of money to have a legally obtained copy of. But there are ways to do it. And, you can technically do an in-place upgrade on Windows 10 Home to upgrade to Windows 10 Enterprise IoT LTSC. And that will actually net you 6-7 more years of security updates. But again, that's unless you're a commercial platform, a commercial customer running this on a point of service or an ATM or some type of sort of industry level machine like that, that is technically illegal and you shouldn't do it. But there are ways to do it. I'm not going to tell you what to look up, but you can do it if you're somebody who absolutely needs to remain on Windows 10 for the next few years, which you shouldn't. Just upgrade to Windows 11. If you're going to go to the effort of hacking IoT onto your PC, just force Windows 11. I don't know why it's easier, and it's nicer. I remain by this. Windows 11 is better than Windows 10. I know there's a lot of people who just outright disagree. You're wrong. You are wrong. Windows 11 is better than Windows 10. There is no area where Windows 10 is better than Windows 10, even when it comes to performance, unless you're using something super old. Any modern Windows 10 PC from 2015 to 2018 and onwards runs Windows 11 better than it does Windows 10. I'm ready to stand by that. Games run better. The system is just nicer to look at. Things are easier to use. It's more stable. It's more performant. It's just a better operating system. It even has less ads, and also it's easy to turn off ads and uninstall bloatware on Windows 11 versus Windows 10. People seem to think that the whole ad thing came about with Windows 11. It just didn't. Windows 10 did it first and did it worse and made it more egregious. Do you remember when you set up a new Windows 10 PC and you go into the start menu and you see things like Candy Crush Saga automatically installing and other like crappy mobile games? That's not a thing on Windows 11, as far as I'm aware. Like, I've never ever seen that happen on Windows 11. That was a thing all the time on Windows 10, and I wouldn't be surprised if it still is. So yeah, if you're pushing back against Windows 11 because you think Windows 10 is a technically superior operating system, it isn't. They had share the same level of telemetry sharing. Windows 11 has ads that you can disable more easily, and I truly believe Windows 11 has less bloat than Windows 10. Windows 10 towards the end of its life, I think a lot of people, because a lot of Windows 11 users obviously haven't used Windows 10 in a while, they really shitified Windows 10. Like, it's bad. Like, a default install of the latest version of Windows 10 is rough. It's not great. You've got to do a lot of work to make it streamlined and nice. Windows 11, you have to do a lot less work. And I'm going to do a video on this because people just don't believe me when I say this, but it is true. Windows 11 works and is just better than Windows 10, and I won't hear otherwise.
I got nothing to say about Windows 10, so
yeah, that's fair.
It served its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving on.
Yeah.
So, Ally X. I guess we'll quickly talk about that. So, the Ally and Ally X came out this week, $599 and $999 for the price tag. So definitely not cheap on them. I will say, actually, let me check the stock of it though, because last I checked, there is no stock. So people are buying them. Oh, let's see, add to cart. Let's see when it's shipping. Okay, mid-November. I could pick it up in the store, but I can get it shipped to me within the next few days. But the demand does seem to be pretty high for them. So that's interesting. But the reviews have been a little bit all over the place. IGN gave it a 9 out of 10, and Gadget 88 out of 100, Gizmodo 4 out of 5. The Verge, 6 out of 10 and 4 out of 10, of course. We gave it, I think it was 4.5 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 for the big one, the Ally X. And for the regular Ally, we just gave it a 4. The choice should probably be the Ally X if you can afford it. But $1,000 is pretty expensive. But then again, it is cheaper than the ROG Ally. And I see some people kind of complain about the pricing. And it's like, they're like, you can buy a console that's cheaper than that. It's like, all right, but what are you going to play your console on? Oh, your TV. Most people already have a TV, granted, but like in theory, that's how you would get an Xbox to work. You'd have to buy the TV and the console and the speakers and all that kind of stuff. That's what makes handhelds. You're buying the display, you're buying the speakers, you're buying the battery, you're buying miniaturization aspect of it. So yeah, it's going to be more expensive. That's just the way it is. But I think these devices look great. I think the Ally X looks really nice, mostly because of the ergonomic design on it, which people praised. There doesn't seem to be any fatal flaws to it outside of price. And there, like I said, I get it, but there's tons of options. You still have Steam Deck on the market. You still have the original Asus ROG Ally. Of course, you have Lenovo's stuff that's available too. So there are plenty of choices out there for handheld gaming PCs, and that's what's kind of cool. I think what Acer's releasing, like an 11 and 14-inch version or something, is like absurdly huge. But having that sort of market and diversity, I think, is great because sure, $999 too expensive. Okay, so go buy the regular ROG Ally then. Then it's like that's actually a pretty good deal. But I think they kind of set the bar here with this, just because the Ally X gets pretty solid battery life. Ergonomics are great. People say, yeah, it's heavier, but they don't notice the weight. The display is good. It's not OLED, which is unfortunate, but they did that to keep the price down even more, probably. Variable refresh display, of course, which I would argue is pretty critical. It gets pretty solid battery life as well. I don't know. I think these are really great devices. Oh, and the big thing was, of course, that this is the first handheld that's built around this new version of Windows that's like optimized for gaming. So the out-of-box experience is completely all mapped to the Xbox keys, which is
Hmm.
pretty wild. So when it's setting up, you can hit A, B, A, B, X, and all that to answer stuff, which is a really nice thing. And then, of course, it boots into this new like Xbox UI, which not only looks familiar to people and looks very much like a traditional launcher, but the traditional Windows desktop is hidden and they've unloaded a bunch of pre-installed apps like Teams and all this kind of stuff, which gets you between 1 and 2 gigs of RAM back, which is not insignificant. And I think that's what people have been asking for. And what's kind of cool is you can then switch to desktop, get that experience. The only negative is when you want to switch back, you have to reboot the device. I think that might be solvable for them at some point, but that is kind of a downside. As to why get this instead of Steam Deck, well, it's more powerful, right? Especially if you go with the Ally X, right? It's going to be way more powerful. You're getting uh, higher frame rates and all this kind of stuff, better battery life. Some people do, believe it or not, want a dual use handheld PC because you can then dock this and have a regular Windows computer with you. Like if you're a college kid, you can just bring this back to your dorm room, have a display, keyboard, and mouse, and now you're just using a regular Windows 10 computer. That's actually pretty powerful. And so I think that's a good option for some people. And everybody's going to make use of that, of course. But uh, again, or you could also just buy and just put Steam OS on it, I suppose, too, if you wanted to, right? And then you get the best of both worlds. If you're really a Steam OS, diehard, then you're just going to get your favorite operating system on really, really nice hardware. So I think this is good. I think it sets the bar. I hope this is step one for them. We have heard that they want to do a more kind of advanced version where the OS is more optimized even more. I don't know. What do you think about all this stuff? And do you think critics and reviewers were fair with it or too harsh?
Yeah, I think they might have been a bit too harsh on the Windows side of things, like the actual user experience, because we know we've tried it, I've tried it, and I think it's actually a massive improvement over what it was before. I think the criticisms are fair in that it does really feel like it is just the Xbox app running full screen, and there's a couple of hooks into the system that makes it try to be like an interface, like a shell for Windows,
Yeah,
but it really is just an app that's running full screen for the most part.
yeah.
And I see that, and I totally get that. I will say, I think this is going to become the norm for Microsoft. I think, you know, the Windows shell is just so old and it has so much legacy as part of it that it actually probably is easier for Microsoft to just build an app interface and run it full screen and then hook into the system when necessary versus try to build a brand new interface from scratch on top of Windows desktop. I just
Mhm.
think, we just talked about Windows, this idea of Windows 12 and like this, what might the desktop interface look like? If you open up the Copilot app today, it's already got like a sort of home screen that allows you to jump into recent apps and tasks and whatnot and recent files. It wouldn't take much work for them to just build a more sort of rigorous interface into that and run that full screen on Windows 12. Like I wouldn't be surprised if in the future this is what we see. We've already seen it on like the NXT device, the Windows 365 Link. As far as I'm aware, that is running basically just the Windows Remote Desktop app, the Windows app now, as it's called, in full screen. Like everything's just an app now. Even the interface is an app. This idea that there is a system level interface, a shell interface, I think is probably going to go away in the next 10 years, and Windows will just become a kiosk mode, essentially, just run a map in full screen
Right.
that can handle the interface and run apps above it. That's my actual bold prediction. So what Xbox is doing is actually just building on how Windows is going to be in the future. That's a complete guess. I don't know, but that's what I would bet money on, that becoming more of a normal thing versus Microsoft going back and actually building a brand new shell for Windows dedicated to these handhelds. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think the market's big enough right now to dedicate doing that, especially if they
Yeah.
can kind of get away with this and just really improve it. I'll also say though, their time to market seemed to be pretty quick with this. And at least from what I've seen, it seems pretty polished. Like I didn't read reports of it crashing. I did read a couple reports of once in a while there'd be a hiccup here and there, but for the most part, people said it was pretty smooth, it ran well and all that kind of stuff. So it's like if they can just take what they have now and keep improving it, which we know they're going to, uh, I think that's a pretty great thing. And of course, we do expect this OS app thing to roll out to other handhelds a little bit later in early 2026 was the date.
Yes, that's
Is
right.
that
Yes, so it's launching now on the Ally and Ally X, and the experience, the software experience should come to basically all Windows handhelds next year.
right? Yeah. So, something to look forward to. I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. We'll see how they sell. Uh, like I said, if you find them too expensive, there are definitely other options out there that'll be on the market. So I think it's a good thing. But yeah, I don't know. Good stuff. All right. We got anything else we want to talk about, or we'll wrap it up?
I think we can wrap it up. Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for this week's podcast. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky and Threads. Just look for my name. Same with Zach. We do record this every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, you can join our YouTube channel live and join our conversations there. We'll do some Q&A with the audience now, which we won't record. But if you ever want to join in or watch the video rebroadcast, you can do that as well. As always, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Cool. If you want to ask questions in the chat, please do put them in there. Otherwise, we'll leave. See, now I'm curious what it would be like if I did just run the Copilot app full screen. I'm going to try and do that in kiosk mode.
I mean, the app looks pretty nice.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of like almost like a home screen at this point, isn't it? Like you can jump
Yeah.
into stuff straight through the app. Like if I remember rightly, there's like I've just opened it. Oh yeah. Get guided. Like there's app icons here and stuff. Like it wouldn't be so hard for them to just be like, just click on an app and open it.
Yeah.
Is there a way to install the Xbox version on a regular desktop PC? There is a hacky way of doing it, but it requires you having to simulate the size of your screen, because one of the checks it makes is if your screen size. It wants a screen that's smaller than 10 inches, I think. And so if you're using it on, like a 27-inch monitor, it won't appear. You have to use a third-party bit of software that allows you to trick Windows into thinking of running it on a smaller screen. With Windows 10 versions no longer being supported except for certain LTSC releases, how long do you expect web browsers will continue to support Windows 10 as far as updates go? Probably at least half a decade. I would not be surprised if in 5 years Google Chrome is still fully compatible with Windows 10. I think Chrome ran on Windows 7 until I want to say, let me double check this. I want to say 2020, maybe 2019.
Yeah, I mean, Google doesn't want to give up any market share.
Yeah.
So they're going to because if they stop supporting, people are going to switch browsers. They're just going to surrender their market share. And I just mentioned about how hard it is to get people to switch browsers. So I think they'll probably keep it going.
That's insane. Google Chrome officially supported Windows 7 until 2022. That's nuts. So that's what.
And I bet you can still install it and run
probably.
it.
Yeah, definitely, probably. Yeah, so it'd be a long while. I think it's especially considering how big Windows 10's market share is still. I don't think any developer is thinking about dropping support for Windows 10 other than Microsoft in the foreseeable future. I think Windows 10 users will be perfectly okay running and being fully compatible with apps and drivers for years and years to come. Do you guys like the interface of the Copilot app in the sense that a computer could use it?
That's kind of what you're just talking
about.
Yeah,
I think that the foundations are there. I don't think it would take a lot of work for them to sort of beef it up a bit to make it more capable as a desktop UI replacement.
And it would need to be customizable.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, of course. Let me change the icons.
Yeah.
Will we see Copilot, Co-Writer, Co-Creator, and Recall merger? And will the new Copilot capabilities be Copilot Plus PC exclusive? Not sure what you mean by merger, but yes, all the new Copilot stuff we talked about today, Copilot Actions, Copilot Vision, Hey Copilot, that is not Copilot Plus exclusive. It works on all Windows 11 PCs regardless of NPU. How do you
How do you?
reckon? Sorry,
Yeah, go
go
ahead.
on.
No, you can read it.
How do you recommend a household sets up their PC with no local account supported anymore? Or, for example, if you have a local admin account and your personal one isn't an admin? I'm not sure what you're asking. You're asking Microsoft account, like the requirement for a Microsoft account. I think just use a Microsoft account. I,
Yeah,
I don't see the problem. I
create a
use
generic one for the house.
I'll create a generic one for the house. Or even then, if you use Windows 11 Pro, it's super easy to set up a local account on Windows 11 Pro. You just go when you get the prompt to sign in with a Microsoft account, press more sign-in options. Then the option for domain join appears. Select that, and then you can just create a local account. You don't. It won't ask you about that domain later. It never does. So yeah, just do that. Upgrade to Windows 11 Pro if you want to use all local accounts easily on Windows 11.
Why can't Copilot give my driver license on my OneDrive when it's is a file support due to when it's files? Uh, there might be a privacy issue. It could also just be not that good yet. So I don't really know that one. I've never tried to have it retrieve that information, but if you have submit feedback through the app, it might be worth a shot doing that.
Isn't the idea of everything being full screen what put people off Windows 8? I wasn't saying everything. I just meant the Microsoft builds an app that is the interface for Windows, like the Copilot app. And if they built in the ability to launch apps through the Copilot app, they could run in Windows. Like that wouldn't be a problem. It just the Copilot app would be the whatever handles the interface that surrounds the windowed apps. You can still have cascading windows. Yeah, I'm not advocating for everything going full screen again. I'm just saying the interface could just be an app that runs in full screen.
What do you think causes the aversion to any type of change? Why do Linux people hang out amongst Windows enthusiasts, and why do they think their opinions on consumer tech matter? Uh, a lot of questions there, none that I disagree with, at least the sentiment. Uh, the aversion to change, yeah, I mean, I think just especially the older you get, you just get fixated in your ways, you know what works, and you become efficient at it. And so maybe you don't see a reason for change and you just become more resistive. Where when you're younger, you're willing to try new things. You don't have as much at stake, right? If you're 13, jumping between operating systems probably isn't a big deal for you because you're not bringing your laptop to work and has all your files on it and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think that's one thing. I think most people just, yeah, they just find what they like and they kind of stick with it. Same thing with phones and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard. AI is conceptually a little bit difficult to explain. And let's be fair, a lot of the benefits for AI aren't here yet, right? It's starting to show up now, but uh, up until recently, it's been just basically a chatbot, as people like to say, even though it's been a really good chatbot. But as the story becomes more obvious and what you can do with this kind of technology, I think people will come around it a little bit more. But it'll take a couple of years. Yeah, like I said, same thing with smartphones. People act like smartphones are the greatest thing in the world. When they first came out, people didn't see the benefit of smartphones. I would show my friends, they were like, why? I just check my email when I get home. Why do I need it on my phone? No one saw the value of it. So people change though. It's even when the first iPhone came out, 2007, I would say smartphones didn't peak in the market. That is, the majority of users had them until 2012, right? After that period, then you really got that changeover happening mainstream. So I think it's just time. And as far as why do Linux users hang out amongst Windows enthusiasts, yeah, I never understood that because you don't find Windows users hanging out Linux forums. We don't go there. We don't talk crap about Linux. I think most Windows users are like, hey, you like Linux? Good for you. Go for it. We don't really care. But for some reason, Linux users, I don't know. I feel like there's a party going on and they're not invited, and that makes them upset. So they show up to the party and then just try to make fun of everyone. Um, but it is a weird thing. I'm like, why? I don't know. We do get a lot of them. I get them on my Twitter too. I'm like, why are you arguing with me with Windows? If you don't like it, don't use it. Like, I don't care. It's no sweat off my back. And why do they think their opinions on consumer tech matter? Yeah, that's true. You know, I think, you know, people have a real tough time thinking outside of their own bubble. Um, I've mentioned multiple times one of my favorite things is some of my best friends barely know what I do. Like they kind of know what I do, but they don't follow any of this stuff. So when I talk to them about technology, I'm getting it from like normal people and how they use it. And surprise, surprise, they don't care about half the things we talk about. Um, and that's not saying it's a bad thing. It's just knowing your audience, right? Uh, and so I think some people, especially if you're Linux, you're very technically advanced, probably. Um, just to use that system for the reasons why you want to use it, building out the hardware. Like you probably know tech well, so you probably just hang out in tech circles all day. But your average person really has no idea about any of that stuff, nor do they care.
Yeah. There is no normal person who doesn't like technology where Linux is suitable for them. There just isn't one. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist. Do you think Microsoft will allow us to use the new Xbox shell so that I can use my PC connected to a TV and game in it using control like a camera console? Like I said, currently there's a hard-coded check that will check for screen size for 10 inches or less. So currently no, but there's no reason why Microsoft couldn't lift that in the future. And I don't see why they wouldn't either, frankly. But at least for now, I think they wanted to keep it limited to handhelds. But I wouldn't be surprised if it rolls out to all gaming PCs at some point. Note to self, harass the Windows Central people about Linux once every week.
Yeah. I mean, it already happens. So
Thanks for answering, Daniel. I read what Zac posted on Reddit, and all those Luddites were just so critical. I can't remember what I posted on Reddit. Was I don't know what you're referring to.
I mean, but Reddit is just that's so unfortunate the thing with social media today. No matter where you post, it's just people who are unhappy are going to
Yeah.
jump into comments and they're going to be the loudest voices. People are happy with something, just go on with their lives. Like, that's why, by the way, I've talked about this also, but I'll keep reminding people it's why you get bothered so much about leaving reviews for products if you liked it. Because remember, it always says that. Do you like our product? Do you want to review it? You may be wondering why. It's because people who actually really, really like things, or at least just say kind of really like it, right? Like, say you were going to rate something 4 out of 5 stars. Like, you're very unlikely to go leave a comment or a review because of that, because you're just going to use the app and be like, yeah, no, it's fine. Da, da, da. The only time you're going to really use a review is like when you have something mad to say about it, right? So they really try hard to get people to leave positive reviews because positive people just end up using the thing and just go on with their lives and they don't feel like they need to brag to the world about how amazing it is. But you will get some of those people too, right? Sometimes someone releases an app, it changes their life, or they think it's fantastic and they feel really passionate. But I think that's the issue why we get hammered so much. And I'm not saying that's someone who enjoys those prompts, by the way, because Microsoft does them all the time too. But it's the same reasons, right? Just people who are happy don't spend time on social networks. So
This next question is a great one. Do you agree that we are approaching the end of an era of apps? And if so, what's next? I do agree with that. I do think if agentic AI and this sort of big wave of AI sticks and it is able to sort of birth a new era of computing devices and form factors, I think the idea of apps as we know them will come. This idea of interfaces that we click into an icon to tap on a bunch of buttons to get a task done. I think that will go away. Things like Copilot Actions and Copilot Vision right now very much are relying on sort of visual intelligence to sort of understand the interface and click through it like a human would. But an AI is a lot more efficient at reading code. And so in the future, we might find apps, air quotes, that are exclusively only usable through an agent because it's only exposing the code to an AI. And so if you wanted to use this service or this app, whatever it may be, you'd be like, hey, Copilot, order me food for this new app that is only usable through an agent. And it would do it for you. And I wouldn't be surprised. This is probably very like a sci-fi like view on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we just go to an assistant to do everything for us. Like we wouldn't open individual apps. It's kind of already kind of like that in China with that super app, but I can't remember the name of it now. WeChat, I think it's called. You do in China, you do everything through WeChat. You make payments, you go on social media, you edit and browse the web. You do whatever you want to do. It's basically through WeChat. It wouldn't be a huge leap to be okay. Now it's an AI app, and now that's also a thing that everyone wants to do across the world. Especially if it's so easy and convenient to talk to you like a human. I don't see why that wouldn't become the new way of computing. And if that's the case, then Microsoft could, and I don't think they will, and they don't deserve it, frankly, could sort of reemerge as a sort of leading player in a new mobile computing market where an AI is at the forefront. You know, phones they've failed at, but if phones are to be replaced by these AI pendants or glasses or wearables, whatever they may be, if Microsoft wants it, they could definitely fight for it, because this is a market that is untested. It's still conceptual, I think, but I think if this tech is going where these AI companies want us to think it's going, that should be possible. And so, yeah, I do think apps as we know them will die off if this AI promise is to be believed. Do you think Copilot will ever get a podcast mode like Notebook LM has? I believe Copilot does already have a Copilot mode, or at least they've announced one. I'm not sure how in depth it is, and I don't know how you can. I think you can just say, "Hey, Copilot, create a podcast about this," and I think it will do it. So give that a try. All right, with that, we should probably sign off.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Follow us on the socials. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time.